The chandeliers sparkled like diamonds suspended from heaven itself, casting golden light across the grand ballroom of the Rosewood Hotel. 300 guests, politicians, celebrities, business moguls, stood beneath vaulted ceilings adorned with Renaissance paintings, sipping champagne from crystal flutes. The orchestra played a soft waltz, violins singing sweetly as couples glided across the marble floor. But suddenly, the music stopped. The conversations died. Every single eye in that room turned toward the center of the ballroom, where a small girl in a white lace dress stood screaming at the top of her lungs. Her name was Lyric Wright, 7 years old, with caramel-brown skin and thick curls pulled into 2 puffs. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she stomped her feet, her tiny fists clenched in pure rage. "I hate you! I hate all of you!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. Tables fell silent. Waiters froze mid-step. Trays balanced precariously in their hands. A woman in pearls clutched her chest dramatically. A man in a tailored tuxedo shook his head in disgust. And kneeling beside Lyric, his jaw tight with humiliation and exhaustion, was her father, Dominic Wright, one of the wealthiest black men in America, a billionaire hotel magnate whose name graced Forbes lists and business magazines. Dominic's hands trembled slightly as he reached for his daughter, his voice barely above a whisper. "Lyric, please, not here, not now. We can talk about this at home." But Lyric wasn't listening. She never listened anymore. Her small hand shot out and grabbed a crystal champagne glass from a nearby table, and before anyone could react, she hurled it across the ballroom with all her might. The glass shattered against the wall in an explosion of glittering fragments, and gasps rippled through the crowd like waves. Several guests stepped backward, their faces twisted in shock and judgment. Dominic closed his eyes, his shoulders sagging under the crushing weight of failure and shame. Standing just 10 feet away, a young woman named Rebecca, the 19th babysitter Dominic had hired in 6 months, gathered her designer purse with shaking hands, tears streaming down her pale face. "I'm done," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry, Mr. Wright, but I just can't." She turned on her heel and walked out the grand doors, leaving Dominic alone with his screaming daughter in a room full of hundreds of witnesses. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. 19 babysitters in 6 months. What kind of child was this? What kind of father couldn't control his own daughter? Dominic Wright wasn't always this broken, this exhausted, this defeated. 3 years ago, he had everything a man could possibly want. A beautiful wife named Simone, who had eyes like warm honey and a laugh that could light up entire rooms. A thriving hotel empire that spanned 5 continents, with properties in Paris, Dubai, Tokyo, New York, and Los Angeles. A daughter who giggled like sunshine and ran to him every evening when he came home from work. They were the perfect family, the kind featured on magazine covers, the kind other people envied and admired. Dominic and Simone attended charity galas together, danced at political fundraisers, and built their empire side by side. But then, 3 years ago, everything changed in the span of a single doctor's appointment. Simone had complained of fatigue, of persistent pain in her side. The doctors ran tests. The results came back. Cancer. Stage 4. It had already spread to her lymph nodes, her liver, her lungs. The oncologists gave her 6 months, maybe less. Dominic hired the best specialists money could buy. He flew them in from Switzerland, from Boston, from Johns Hopkins. But money couldn't stop what was already in motion. 6 months after the diagnosis, Simone was gone, and Dominic's entire world collapsed like a house of cards. In the months following Simone's death, Dominic threw himself into his work with desperate intensity, burying his grief in boardrooms and business deals and international conferences. He expanded his hotel empire aggressively, opening new properties in Cape Town and Mumbai, acquiring struggling chains and transforming them into luxury destinations. He won awards: Hotelier of the Year, Entrepreneur of the Decade. His face appeared on magazine covers. Presidents and prime ministers called him for advice. But every single night, he came home to an enormous, empty mansion that echoed with silence and memories. And he came home to a daughter who was drowning in grief and rage, a little girl who had lost her mother at age 4 and didn't know how to process the devastating loss. Lyric had been such a happy child before Simone died, always singing, always dancing, always asking questions about everything. But after the funeral, something inside her broke. She stopped smiling. She stopped singing. She started throwing tantrums that lasted for hours, screaming until her voice went hoarse. She broke toys, threw dishes, refused to eat, refused to sleep, refused to listen to anyone. Dominic hired the best child psychologists money could buy, and they all said the same thing. She's grieving. She needs time. She needs consistency. She needs love. So Dominic did what wealthy, desperate fathers do. He hired help, professional help. The first babysitter was a woman named Margaret, a stern-faced British nanny with 30 years of experience and impeccable references. She lasted exactly 4 days before Lyric poured a full carton of orange juice onto her laptop, destroying $3,000 worth of equipment and a week's worth of work. Margaret quit on the spot. The second babysitter, a cheerful college student named Ashley, lasted 6 days before Lyric locked her in the basement during a thunderstorm. Ashley quit via text message at 2 a.m. The third, fourth, and fifth babysitters quit without any dramatic incidents. They simply stopped showing up, unwilling to face another day of Lyric's rage and defiance. By the time Dominic reached the 10th babysitter, he'd stopped learning their names. By the 15th, he'd stopped hoping they'd stay. By the 19th, Rebecca, who'd just walked out of the charity gala, Dominic was completely, utterly desperate. He sat in his study that night, nursing a glass of whiskey, staring at the wall. His assistant, Bernard, a 60-year-old black man with gray hair and kind, patient eyes, knocked softly on the door. "Sir, may I speak with you?" Bernard had worked for the Wright family for 25 years. He'd been there when Lyric was born, when Simone died, through every nanny and every crisis. Dominic gestured wearily for Bernard to enter, and the older man sat down carefully in the leather chair across from the massive mahogany desk. "Sir," Bernard began carefully, choosing his words with precision, "perhaps we've been approaching this problem incorrectly. We keep hiring professionals, people with degrees, credentials, years of experience. But Lyric doesn't need credentials. She needs someone who genuinely cares, someone who won't run away at the first sign of difficulty." Dominic looked up, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. "What are you suggesting, Bernard?" The assistant pulled a manila folder from beneath his arm and placed it gently on the desk. "There's a young woman who works at the East Side Community Center in Baltimore. She runs the after-school program for at-risk children. The director there, Pastor Mitchell, speaks very highly of her. He says she's patient, resilient, and refuses to quit no matter how difficult the children become. Several of the kids she works with have backgrounds similar to Lyric's: trauma, loss, anger issues, and she's connected with every single one of them." Dominic opened the folder slowly, his tired eyes scanning the single-page resume inside. The young woman's name was Nyla James, 20 years old. No college degree yet. She was taking classes part-time at community college. No formal childcare training. No impressive credentials. Just a simple resume listing volunteer work and 2 part-time jobs. The photograph clipped to the resume showed a young black woman with warm, intelligent brown eyes and natural hair pulled back into a simple bun. She wore a plain navy blue sweater and jeans in the picture. No makeup, no jewelry, no attempt to look polished or professional. She just looked real, authentic, kind. Dominic stared at the photo for a long moment, something stirring in his chest. Hope, maybe, or perhaps just desperation wearing a different mask. "She's very young," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure if he was making an observation or an objection. Bernard nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. But perhaps that's exactly what Lyric needs. All the other babysitters have been authority figures, strict nannies, professional caregivers, people who come in trying to control her. This young woman might be different. She might be able to connect with Lyric on a more personal level, almost like an older sister, rather than another parent figure trying to enforce rules." Dominic read through Nyla's references. Pastor Mitchell had written, "Nyla James is one of the most compassionate, dedicated young women I have ever known. She works tirelessly with our most challenging children and never, ever gives up on them. She has a gift for seeing past difficult behavior to the hurt underneath." Another reference from a school counselor said, "Nyla changed my entire perspective on what patience and commitment look like. Highly recommended." Dominic closed the folder and looked at Bernard, really looked at him, and saw the genuine hope in the older man's eyes. Bernard had watched this family fall apart over the past 3 years. He'd seen Dominic transform from a vibrant, happy man into someone who barely slept and rarely smiled. He'd watched Lyric change from a joyful child into an angry, hurting little girl. And now, Bernard was offering what might be their last, best chance. "Set up an interview," Dominic said finally, his voice rough with exhaustion and something that might have been hope. "Let's meet this Nyla James." 3 days later, Nyla stood at the towering iron gates of the Wright estate, staring up at the mansion with wide, disbelieving eyes. The house was enormous. 3 stories of pristine white stone and floor-to-ceiling windows, surrounded by gardens that looked like they belonged in a European palace. Fountains sparkled in the afternoon sun. Marble statues lined the circular driveway. Luxury cars sat in the garage. A Bentley, a Mercedes, a Tesla. Nyla had never seen anything like it in her entire life. She'd grown up in a cramped 3-bedroom apartment in West Baltimore, where 5 kids shared 2 bedrooms, and the walls were so thin you could hear the neighbors arguing. Her mother, Carol, cleaned houses 6 days a week. Her father, Robert, drove long-haul trucks and was gone for weeks at a time. There had never been enough money in the James household. Never enough food, never enough heat in the winter, never enough anything. But Carol James had raised her children to believe that hard work and integrity could change your circumstances, could open doors that seemed permanently locked. So Nyla had worked since she was 14, babysitting, cleaning, tutoring younger kids, anything to bring in extra money. She'd graduated high school with honors despite working 30 hours a week. She'd started community college, taking classes at night while working 2 part-time jobs during the day. She volunteered at the East Side Community Center every Saturday, working with kids who reminded her of her younger siblings, kids who were angry, scared, struggling to survive in difficult circumstances. And when Pastor Mitchell showed her the job posting for a live-in babysitter position with a salary that was more than her mother made in 6 months, Nyla knew immediately that this was her chance. A chance to help her family. A chance to prove that she could do something meaningful with her life. A chance to make a real difference. So she'd applied, never actually believing she'd get the job. And when Bernard called to schedule an interview, she'd nearly dropped the phone in shock. Now, standing at these enormous gates, wearing her nicest thrift store blouse and her only pair of dress pants, Nyla felt suddenly, overwhelmingly small. But Nyla James had never backed down from a challenge in her entire life, so she straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin, and pressed the intercom button with a steady hand. Bernard's warm voice crackled through the speaker. "Miss James, welcome. Please come in." The gates swung open slowly, and Nyla walked up the long driveway, her heart pounding in her chest. Bernard met her at the massive front door, his kind face breaking into a genuine smile. "Miss James, it's wonderful to meet you in person. Please, come inside." He led her through a marble foyer that was larger than her entire apartment, past crystal chandeliers and original oil paintings and furniture that probably cost more than her family's annual income. Everything gleamed and sparkled. Everything was perfect. Nyla felt completely out of place, like an actor who'd wandered onto the wrong movie set, but she kept her expression calm and professional. They walked down a long hallway lined with family photographs. Pictures of Dominic with a beautiful woman who must have been his late wife, pictures of baby Lyric, pictures of happier times. Bernard led her to a set of double doors and knocked softly. "Mr. Wright, Miss James is here." A deep voice from inside said, "Send her in." Bernard opened the doors, and Nyla stepped into the most magnificent office she'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 3 walls, filled with leather-bound volumes. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center of the room. And standing by the window, silhouetted against the afternoon light, was Dominic Wright himself. He turned slowly, and Nyla's breath caught in her throat, despite her determination to remain professional. He was tall, at least 6'3", with broad shoulders and a powerful build that his perfectly tailored charcoal suit only emphasized. His dark skin gleamed in the sunlight. His hair was cut very short, with distinguished gray streaks at the temples. His jawline was sharp enough to cut glass. But it was his eyes that captured Nyla's attention. Dark brown eyes that should have been warm, but instead looked haunted, exhausted, carrying the weight of unspeakable loss. He was, without question, the most handsome man Nyla had ever seen in person, and also clearly one of the saddest. "Miss James," he said, his voice deep and measured, each word carefully controlled. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." Nyla sat in the leather chair across from his desk, folding her hands in her lap, meeting his gaze directly. Her mother had always taught her that looking someone in the eye showed respect and confidence, even when you felt neither. Dominic remained standing for a moment, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. Then he moved to his chair and sat down, leaning back slightly, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You're 20 years old," he stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir, I am," Nyla replied calmly, her voice steady despite the nervousness churning in her stomach. "I turn 21 in 3 months." Dominic's eyes narrowed slightly. "You're very young to be taking on a position like this. My daughter is extremely difficult. She has driven away 19 babysitters in the past 6 months alone. Some lasted a week, some lasted a day. One lasted exactly 4 hours before she quit. What makes you think you'll be any different from all the others? It was a fair question, Nyla thought. A legitimate concern. She could give him platitudes about her experience, about her references, about her dedication. But instead, she decided to give him the truth. Mr. Wright, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't have fancy degrees. I don't have years of professional nanny experience. I haven't worked for celebrities or wealthy families. What I do have is something that can't be taught in any classroom or training program. I have the absolute unwavering refusal to quit on a child who's hurting. I've worked with kids at the community center who've been through things that would break most adults: abuse, neglect, poverty, violence, loss. And I've never, not once, walked away from a single one of them, no matter how hard they pushed me away. She paused, making sure he was really listening. Your daughter isn't bad, Mr. Wright. She's in pain. She lost her mother. She's terrified of being abandoned again, so she pushes people away before they can leave her. It's a defense mechanism. I understand that because I've seen it before. Dominic's expression shifted slightly. Something flickering in those dark, tired eyes. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. No one else had described Lyric that way. Everyone else had focused on her behavior, her tantrums, her defiance. But this young woman, barely more than a girl herself, had seen straight through to the hurt underneath. She'll test you, Dominic said quietly, leaning forward now, his forearms resting on the desk. She'll push every single boundary you set. She'll break things, hide things, scream, cry, refuse to eat or sleep. She'll do everything in her power to make you quit. She'll make you want to walk out that door and never come back. Can you honestly tell me you're prepared for that? Nyla met his gaze without flinching, without hesitation. Yes, sir, I am. Because I understand something important. When children act out like that, they're not trying to push you away. They're testing to see if you'll stay. They're asking, will you leave me too? And my answer to Lyric will be the same every single day, no matter what she does. Number, I will not leave you. I will not give up on you. I will be here. Silence filled the enormous study. Dominic stared at this young woman, this stranger who had just articulated something he himself had struggled to understand about his own daughter. Bernard had been right. There was something different about Nyla James, something genuine, something that couldn't be found in credentials or resumes. When can you start? Dominic asked, and Nyla saw something she hadn't expected to see in his eyes. Hope. Tomorrow morning, if that works for you, Nyla replied. I need to pack my things and talk to my family, but I can be here by 9 o'clock. Dominic nodded slowly. Bernard will show you to your room. You'll have a suite on the 3rd floor, near Lyric's room. Salary will be deposited weekly into your account. You'll have weekends off if you want them, though I hope you'll choose to stay. Consistency is important for Lyric. Are these terms acceptable? The salary he named was more than Nyla had made in the past year combined. She nearly gasped, but managed to keep her expression neutral. Yes, sir. Very acceptable. Thank you for this opportunity. That night, Nyla sat in her family's cramped apartment, surrounded by her 4 younger siblings, and told them about the job. Her mother cried with relief and pride. Her father, home for once, squeezed her shoulder and said, You're going to change that little girl's life, baby. I know you will. Nyla packed her single suitcase with everything she owned: 3 pairs of jeans, 5 shirts, 1 dress, some books, and a photograph of her family. At dawn the next morning, she rode 3 buses to reach the Wright estate, carrying her suitcase and her determination in equal measure. Bernard met her at the gate with a warm smile and helped her carry her meager belongings to her new room. The bedroom Bernard showed her to was larger than the entire apartment Neela had shared with her family. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the center of the room, covered in soft white linens that probably had a thread count higher than Neela could imagine. There was a mahogany desk by the window, a plush armchair in the corner, and a walk-in closet that echoed when she stepped inside because she had so few clothes to fill it. The attached bathroom had marble countertops, a soaking tub, and a shower with 6 different settings. Neela stood in the middle of this luxury, feeling like an imposter in someone else's life. But she didn't have time to process the surreal nature of her new circumstances, because Bernard cleared his throat gently. "Miss James, Lyric is waiting downstairs. Mr. Wright thought it best if you met her right away, rather than delaying the inevitable." Neela nodded, smoothing her hands over her simple blue shirt. "I'm ready." But as she descended the grand staircase, she realized that nothing could have prepared her for her first encounter with Lyric Wright. The little girl sat on the bottom step, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face set in an expression of pure fury. She was beautiful. Caramel brown skin that glowed even in her anger, thick curls pulled into 2 perfectly spherical puffs, a pink dress with white sneakers that probably cost more than Neela's entire wardrobe, but her dark eyes blazed with rage and hurt. "You're not staying," Lyric announced coldly before Neela had even reached the bottom step. Her voice was hard, far too hard for a 7-year-old child. "They all leave. You'll leave too. You might as well quit now and save us both the trouble." Neela stopped on the step directly above Lyric and sat down, making herself the same height as the little girl. She didn't tower over her. She didn't use her adult authority. She just sat beside her like an equal. "Hi, Lyric," Neela said gently, her voice warm and completely unaffected by the hostility radiating from the child. "My name is Neela." "It's really nice to meet you." Lyric's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "I don't care what your name is. You're just another babysitter. You'll leave like all the others. They always leave." Neela nodded thoughtfully. "You're right that other babysitters have left. And I can understand why that would make you angry and scared. But I need you to know something important. I'm not like the others. I don't quit. Not on kids. Not ever." Lyric laughed, but it was a bitter, cynical sound that no 7-year-old should be capable of making. "That's what they all say. But then I do something they don't like, and they leave, just like my mommy left." Nyla's heart cracked at those words, at the pain underneath the anger. "Your mommy didn't choose to leave, sweetheart. She got sick. That wasn't your fault, and it wasn't because she didn't love you." "I know that," Lyric snapped, her voice rising. "I'm not stupid. But everyone still leaves. The babysitters leave. My daddy leaves for work all the time. Everyone leaves me alone. So I don't care anymore. I don't care if you stay or go." But Nyla could see the lie in those words, could see the desperate hope hidden beneath layers of protective anger. "Okay," Nyla said simply. "You don't have to care right now. That's fine, but I'm still going to be here. What would you like to do today?" Lyric stared at her, clearly surprised that Nyla hadn't gotten upset or defensive. "Nothing. I don't want to do anything with you." "That's okay too," Nyla replied calmly. "We can just sit here if you want. Or I can read my book and you can do whatever you'd like. I'm not going anywhere." And that's exactly what they did. For the next 2 hours, Nyla sat on that step, reading a worn paperback novel she'd brought from home, while Lyric sat 3 steps above her, watching suspiciously, waiting for Nyla to give up and leave. But Nyla didn't leave. She just sat there, patient and present, sending a clear message. I'm staying. Over the following 2 weeks, Lyric launched a campaign of terror that would have broken lesser people. She hid Nyla's belongings, her shoes, her books, her toothbrush. She refused to eat anything Nyla cooked, throwing the food on the floor and demanding something else. She screamed during bedtime for hours, testing to see if Nyla would eventually give up and leave her alone. One morning, Nyla woke up to find her toothbrush floating in the toilet bowl and Lyric standing in the bathroom doorway with her arms crossed and a challenging smirk on her face. Another afternoon, Nyla was locked out of the house during a violent thunderstorm while Lyric watched from the window, her small face pressed against the glass. Rain soaked through Nyla's clothes as lightning split the sky. She stood on the covered porch, water dripping from her hair, and simply waited. She didn't bang on the door. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten punishment. She just stood there, patient and calm, looking at Lyric through the window. After 20 minutes, Bernard let her back inside, his face creased with concern. "Miss James," he said quietly, handing her a thick towel. "You don't have to endure this kind of treatment. No one would blame you if you left. This goes far beyond normal childcare challenges." Nyla wrapped the towel around her shoulders, shivering slightly from the cold, but she shook her head firmly. "I'm not leaving, Bernard. She needs to know that I meant what I said. I don't quit." That evening, after Nyla had changed into dry clothes, she found Lyric sitting alone in her bedroom, staring out the window at the rain. The little girl's shoulders were hunched, her face troubled. Nyla knocked softly on the doorframe. "Can I come in?" Lyric shrugged, not looking at her. "It's your job. You have to." Nyla entered the room and sat on the floor near Lyric's chair, not crowding her, just being present. "I don't have to do anything," Nyla said gently. "I choose to be here. There's a difference." Lyric finally looked at her, confusion and something else, maybe guilt, flickering in her dark eyes. "Why did you just stand there in the rain? Why didn't you yell at me or tell my dad or quit like everyone else?" Nyla considered the question carefully. "Because you weren't trying to hurt me, Lyric. You were trying to see if I would leave. You were testing me. And I wanted to show you that no matter what you do, I'm going to stay. Because I care about you, and caring doesn't stop just because things get hard." Lyric's bottom lip trembled. "But I was mean to you. I put your toothbrush in the toilet. I locked you outside in a storm. Why don't you hate me?" Nyla's eyes filled with compassion. "Because I understand that you're not a mean kid. You're a hurt kid. There's a big difference. You're scared that if you let yourself care about me, I'll leave just like all the others. So you're pushing me away first, before I can hurt you. But here's the thing, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. You can test me every single day and I'll still be here." Tears began rolling down Lyric's cheeks, and suddenly the tough, angry exterior crumbled completely. She was just a little girl who missed her mother and was terrified of losing anyone else. Meanwhile, Dominic watched all of this from a distance, observed through windows and from doorways, witnessing something he'd begun to think was impossible. He saw Nyla's endless patience. He saw her kindness in the face of cruelty. He saw her refuse to give up even when Lyric did everything possible to drive her away. And he was absolutely stunned. Every other babysitter had quit within days, some within hours. But Nyla kept showing up, kept trying, kept loving his daughter even when Lyric made it nearly impossible. One evening, after another particularly difficult day, Dominic found himself standing outside Lyric's bedroom door, listening to Nyla read a bedtime story. Her voice was soft and melodic, turning the simple children's book into something magical. And for the first time in 3 years, Dominic heard his daughter laugh. Really laugh. Not a bitter, cynical sound, but genuine, joyful laughter. Something in Dominic's chest cracked open, some wall he'd built around his heart after Simone died. He stood there in the hallway, listening to his daughter's laughter, and felt tears burning in his eyes. This young woman, this stranger who'd walked into their broken home less than 3 weeks ago, had done something all the professionals and experts couldn't do. She'd reached Lyric. She'd made his daughter feel safe enough to laugh again. That night, unable to sleep, Dominic went to his study and poured himself a glass of whiskey. He stood by the window, looking out at the gardens bathed in moonlight, thinking about Nyla James. The breakthrough came on a rainy Saturday afternoon, 3 weeks after Nyla had started working for the Wright family. She was in the kitchen, baking chocolate chip cookies from her grandmother's recipe, humming softly to herself as she measured flour and sugar, and she didn't expect Lyric to join her. The little girl usually avoided her during free time, preferring to play alone in her room. But suddenly, Lyric appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing purple pajamas and fuzzy slippers, her expression uncertain and vulnerable. "Can I help?" Lyric asked quietly, her voice so different from the harsh, angry tone she'd used for weeks. Nyla's heart soared with hope, but she kept her voice calm and casual. "Of course you can." "I'd love some help. Why don't you wash your hands, and then you can measure out the chocolate chips." They worked together in companionable silence for several minutes. Lyric carefully counted out cups of chocolate chips, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. Nyla stirred the dough, sneaking glances at the little girl beside her. Then, without warning, Lyric spoke. "Why don't you quit?" Her voice was small, genuinely confused. "I've been really mean to you. I put your stuff in the toilet. I locked you outside. I called you names. Why are you still here?" Nyla set down her wooden spoon and turned to face Lyric fully. "Because I care about you. That doesn't change just because you're having a hard time." Lyric's eyes filled with tears. "But you don't even know me. How can you care about someone you don't know?" Nyla knelt down so they were at eye level, her voice gentle but firm. "I'm getting to know you, Lyric. And so far, I really like what I see. I see a smart, creative girl who loves art and music. I see someone who's funny and clever. I see someone who's been through something incredibly painful and is doing her best to survive it. That's who you are, not the tantrums or the tests. Those are just armor you wear to protect yourself." Lyric's face crumpled, and suddenly she was sobbing. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from her soul. "I miss my mommy," she whispered brokenly. "I miss her so much, and it hurts all the time, and I'm so scared that everyone else is going to leave too." Nyla pulled the little girl into her arms, holding her tight while she cried. "I know, sweetheart. I know it hurts, and it's okay to miss her. It's okay to be sad and angry, but you don't have to be alone with those feelings. I'm here, and I'm not leaving." Lyric clung to Nyla like a drowning person clutching a life preserver, crying until she had no tears left. And when the storm of emotion finally passed, something fundamental had shifted between them. The walls had come down. The tests were over. Lyric had finally allowed herself to trust again. From that day forward, everything changed in the Wright household. Lyric began following Nyla everywhere, chattering constantly about her day, her thoughts, her dreams. They painted together in the art room, creating messy masterpieces that Nyla hung proudly on the refrigerator. They read books together, curled up in the library's window seat. They baked cookies every Saturday. They played in the gardens, chasing butterflies and making up stories about fairy kingdoms. The mansion, which had been cold and silent for 3 years, suddenly filled with warmth and laughter and life. Bernard noticed the change immediately and reported it to Dominic with tears in his eyes. "Sir, I haven't heard Miss Lyric laugh like this since before Mrs. Simone passed. It's like having the old Lyric back. Miss James has performed a miracle," and Dominic noticed too. He began coming home earlier from work, no longer hiding in his office until Lyric was asleep. He joined them for dinner, sitting at the long dining table that had felt so empty for so long. He listened to Lyric's excited stories about her day with Nyla, how they'd planted flowers, how they'd read 3 chapters of a book about dragons, how Nyla had taught her to make friendship bracelets. Dominic watched his daughter's animated face, saw the light returning to her eyes, and felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. And he watched Nyla too, watched the way she listened to Lyric with her whole attention, never dismissing or interrupting. Watched the way she smiled, genuine and warm, nothing fake or performative about it. Watched the way she moved through his home with quiet grace, bringing light into every room she entered. Nyla was beautiful. He couldn't help but notice that. Her natural hair framed her face in soft curls. Her brown eyes sparkled when she laughed. Her smile could light up entire rooms. But it was more than physical beauty that drew Dominic's attention. It was her kindness, her patience, her genuine, unshakable compassion. She was real in a way that few people in his world were. She didn't care about his money or his status. She didn't try to impress him or manipulate him. She just showed up every day and loved his daughter without conditions or expectations. And slowly, dangerously, Dominic began to fall in love with her. It started with small things. The way his heart lifted when he heard her voice in the house. The way he found excuses to linger in whatever room she occupied. The way he thought about her constantly, during business meetings, during conference calls, late at night when he couldn't sleep. One evening, about 2 months after Nyla had started working for him, Dominic came home to find the living room transformed into a blanket fort. Sheets and quilts were draped over furniture, creating tunnels and hideaways. Fairy lights twinkled inside like stars, and from within the fort, he could hear giggles, Lyric's bright laughter mixed with Nyla's deeper, melodic one. Dominic stood in the doorway, briefcase still in hand, staring at the scene. "Daddy," Lyric's head popped out from the fort entrance. "Come see what we made." "It's a castle." Dominic set down his briefcase and knelt to peer inside the fort. Nyla sat cross-legged in the center, surrounded by pillows, a book open in her lap. She looked up at him, and their eyes met. Something electric passed between them, something Dominic had thought he'd never feel again after Simone died. "It's magnificent," he said, his voice rougher than intended. Nyla's cheeks flushed slightly, and she looked away. "Lyric did most of the design work. I just provided engineering support." That night, after Lyric had fallen asleep in the fort and Nyla had carefully carried her to bed, Dominic found himself unable to leave. He stood in the hallway outside Lyric's room, watching through the cracked door as Nyla tucked his daughter in, smoothing the covers and placing her favorite stuffed elephant beside her pillow. When Nyla emerged from the bedroom, she startled slightly at finding Dominic standing there. "Oh, Mr. Wright, I didn't realize you were—" "Dominic," he interrupted softly. "Please, call me Dominic. Mr. Wright makes me feel like you're an employee, and you're—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You're so much more than that. You're family now." Nyla's eyes widened slightly, and she smiled, though there was something uncertain in her expression. "Thank you. That means a lot." They stood there in the dimly lit hallway, and Dominic found himself not wanting to walk away. "Can I make you some tea?" he asked impulsively. "I was going to have a cup before bed." Nyla hesitated, clearly aware that accepting felt like crossing some invisible line between employer and employee, between professional and personal. But then she nodded. "Tea sounds nice." They went to the kitchen together, and Dominic prepared chamomile tea while Nyla sat at the counter, her fingers tracing patterns on the marble surface. The kitchen was enormous, designed for catering large dinner parties, but somehow it felt intimate with just the two of them. "I never properly thanked you," Dominic said as he set a delicate china cup in front of her, "for what you've done for Lyric. For us." Nyla wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "You don't need to thank me. I love Lyric. She's an incredible kid." "She is," Dominic agreed, leaning against the counter across from her. "But she was drowning, and I didn't know how to save her. 19 people tried and failed. But you—" He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "You reached her. You brought my daughter back to life. How did you do it?" Nyla considered the question carefully, sipping her tea before answering. "I didn't do anything special, really. I just showed up. Every day, no matter what she threw at me, literally and figuratively, I showed up. I think that's what she needed most. Not discipline or structure or professional techniques, just someone who refused to abandon her." Dominic stared at this young woman who spoke with such wisdom, such understanding. "You're only 20 years old. How did you become so wise?" Nyla laughed softly, a self-deprecating sound. "I'm not wise. I just grew up in a world where love and loyalty mattered more than anything else, because they were all we had. My family didn't have money or connections or opportunities, but we had each other, and we never gave up on each other. That's what I learned, that showing up matters, that consistency matters, that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every single day." They talked for hours that night, long after the tea grew cold. Dominic told her about Simone, not just about her death, but about her life, about their love story, about the guilt he carried for not being able to save her. Nyla told him about growing up poor, about watching her mother work herself to exhaustion, about her dreams of building a better life. And somewhere in those quiet hours, the walls around Dominic's heart, walls he'd built after Simone died, walls designed to keep everyone at a safe distance, began to crumble. Over the following weeks, Dominic found himself spending more and more time at home. He declined business trips. He left the office at reasonable hours. He wanted to be present for dinner, for bedtime stories, for the small moments that made up a life. And if he was honest with himself, he wanted to be near Nyla. The three of them fell into a rhythm that felt almost like a real family. Dominic, Nyla, and Lyric ate breakfast together every morning. They took walks through the gardens in the evening. They played board games on Sunday afternoons. Lyric blossomed under this attention, becoming more confident, more joyful, more herself. But Dominic was changing too. The exhaustion faded from his eyes. The tension eased from his shoulders. He smiled more, laughed more, came alive in ways he hadn't since Simone's death. Bernard noticed, of course. The wise old assistant saw everything. One afternoon, he approached Dominic in the study with his usual discretion. "Sir, if I may speak candidly?" Dominic looked up from his laptop. "Always, Bernard." "You know that." Bernard chose his words carefully. Miss James has transformed this household. Miss Lyric is thriving, and you, sir, seem happier than you've been in years. But I must ask, have you considered the complications that might arise from certain feelings? Dominic's jaw tightened. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, sir. I'm simply observing that the way you look at Miss James has changed, and the way she looks at you has changed as well. I've worked for this family for 25 years. I know the difference between professional regard and personal affection. Dominic stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, "What am I supposed to do, Bernard? She's 20 years old. She works for me. There's a power imbalance. Society would crucify us. But God help me. I can't stop thinking about her. She's brought light back into this house, back into my life. When I'm near her, I feel alive again. And I know it's wrong. I know it's inappropriate. But love rarely concerns itself with appropriateness, sir," Bernard interrupted gently. "The question isn't whether your feelings are convenient or socially acceptable. The question is whether they're genuine, and whether Miss James shares them." Dominic turned to face his assistant. "Even if she does, how could I possibly pursue this? She's my employee. She might feel obligated to reciprocate out of fear of losing her job. I would never want to put her in that position." Bernard smiled knowingly. "Sir, Miss James is many things, but easily pressured is not one of them. That young woman has a spine of steel. If she has feelings for you, they're real. Trust me." The turning point came at a charity gala Dominic was hosting at one of his hotels, a black tie event to raise money for children's hospitals. Dominic had to attend, as host and primary donor. Lyric begged Nyla to come with them. "Please, Nyla," the little girl pleaded, her dark eyes wide. "I don't want to be alone with all those fancy people. They're boring and they talk about boring things. But if you're there, it won't be so bad." Nyla hesitated, glancing at Dominic. "I don't think that's appropriate, sweetie. This is a fancy event for adults. I'm just the babysitter." But Dominic surprised her by saying, "Actually, I think it's a wonderful idea. You're not just anything, Nyla. You're part of this family, and if it would make Lyric more comfortable, I'd love for you to join us." The problem, of course, was that Nyla owned exactly one dress, and it was a simple cotton sundress from Target that was completely inappropriate for a black tie gala. When she mentioned this to Dominic, he immediately arranged for a personal shopper to visit the house. The next day, 5 designer gowns arrived, each more stunning than the last. Nyla chose a deep emerald green dress with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt. Elegant, sophisticated, but not ostentatious. On the night of the gala, she stood in front of her mirror, barely recognizing herself. The dress fit perfectly. Her hair was styled in soft curls that framed her face. She wore minimal makeup, just enough to highlight her features. She looked, for the first time in her life, like she belonged in this world of wealth and luxury. When Nyla descended the grand staircase that evening, Dominic was waiting in the foyer, adjusting his bow tie. He looked up, and the moment his eyes landed on her, he froze completely. His breath caught audibly in his throat. She was absolutely, devastatingly beautiful. The emerald dress brought out the warmth in her brown skin and made her eyes glow. But it wasn't just the dress or the styling. It was the quiet confidence she carried, the grace in her movements, the genuine kindness that radiated from her very being. "Nyla," he breathed, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "You look—" He couldn't finish the sentence. What words could possibly capture what he was feeling? Bernard, standing nearby, smiled knowingly and said, "Miss James, you look absolutely beautiful." "Thank you, Bernard," Nyla said, blushing slightly as she reached the bottom of the stairs. Lyric came running from the sitting room, wearing a lavender dress with sparkles. "Nyla, you look like a princess." Nyla laughed and twirled for her. "So do you, sweetheart." The gala was held in the grand ballroom of Dominic's flagship hotel, a magnificent space with soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Hundreds of guests filled the room, politicians, celebrities, business leaders, all dressed in designer gowns and custom tuxedos. Nyla felt overwhelmed by the opulence, by the casual wealth on display, by conversations about vacation homes and private jets and stock portfolios. But Lyric held her hand tightly, grounding her, reminding her why she was here. They spent the evening together, Nyla and Lyric, exploring the dessert table and watching couples dance. Dominic circulated through the crowd, fulfilling his obligations as host, but his eyes kept finding Nyla across the room. He watched her laugh with Lyric, watched her treat his daughter with such obvious love and care, and felt his heart swell with an emotion he'd thought died with Simone. Halfway through the evening, an older woman approached Dominic, Victoria Monroe, a wealthy socialite known for her sharp tongue and sharper observations. "Dominic, darling," she purred, her eyes following his gaze to where Nyla stood with Lyric. "Who is that stunning young woman with your daughter? I don't believe I've seen her in our circles before." "Her name is Nyla James," Dominic said carefully, his tone neutral. "She's Lyric's caregiver." Victoria's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose dramatically. "Her babysitter? My, she's quite beautiful, and very young, if I'm not mistaken. Be careful, Dominic. People do love to talk, and tongues will wag if they see you looking at your employee the way you've been looking at her all evening." Dominic's jaw tightened with barely controlled anger. "Let them talk, Victoria. I don't particularly care what people think." Victoria smiled knowingly, sipping her champagne. "Perhaps you should, darling. You're a public figure, a black billionaire with a reputation to protect. Society can be cruel to those who step outside expected boundaries, especially when it comes to matters of age difference and employment dynamics." Dominic turned to face her directly, his voice cold and controlled. "With all due respect, Victoria, Nyla James is one of the most remarkable people I've ever met. She has more integrity, compassion, and wisdom in her 20 years than most people develop in a lifetime. If anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me directly." He walked away, leaving Victoria staring after him with raised eyebrows. Later that evening, Dominic found Nyla alone on the balcony, looking out at the glittering city skyline. The sounds of the party filtered through the glass doors behind them, music, laughter, the clink of champagne glasses. But out here, it was quiet and peaceful. "Needed some air?" Dominic asked softly as he joined her at the railing. Nyla smiled without looking at him. "It's a lot. All those people, all that wealth just casually on display. It's overwhelming." "I know the feeling," Dominic said. "I've been attending events like this for 15 years, and I still find them exhausting." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the night air cool against their skin. Then Dominic turned to face her, his heart pounding. "Nyla, I need to tell you something. Something I probably shouldn't say, but I can't keep it inside anymore." Nyla turned to look at him, her eyes wide and uncertain. "Okay." Dominic took a deep breath. "These past few months, watching you with Lyric, getting to know you, spending time together as a family. It's changed everything for me. You've brought light back into our lives. You've given my daughter hope and joy. And his voice grew thick with emotion. You've made me feel alive again. Made me believe that maybe I deserve a second chance at happiness. Nyla, I'm falling in love with you. I know I shouldn't say it. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this is complicated and inappropriate. But I can't pretend anymore that what I feel is just gratitude or professional appreciation. It's so much more than that. Nyla's breath caught in her throat. Tears gathered in her eyes as she stared at him. Dominic, you can't mean that. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because you're Dominic Wright, billionaire, industry leader. You're on magazine covers. You have dinner with presidents. And I'm nobody. I'm a 20-year-old girl from West Baltimore who grew up poor and never finished college. We're from completely different worlds. Dominic reached for her hands, holding them gently. You're not nobody. You're the most extraordinary person I've ever met. You're kind, patient, strong, wise beyond your years. You've transformed my daughter's life and mine. I don't care about the age difference. I don't care what society thinks. I don't care about any of that. All I care about is that you're the first person since Simone died who's made me want to live again. Really live, not just go through the motions. Tears rolled down Nyla's cheeks. I care about you too. So much. More than I should. But Dominic, I'm scared. What if this doesn't work? What if people judge us? What if I'm not enough for your world? You're more than enough, Dominic said fiercely. And I don't want you to change or become someone else. I love exactly who you are right now. Stay with me. Not as the babysitter, not as the employee. Stay as the woman I love. And before either of them could overthink it further, Dominic leaned in and kissed her. Soft at first, tentative, giving her the chance to pull away. But Nyla didn't pull away. She kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palms. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. Tell me you feel this too. Tell me I'm not alone in this. You're not alone, Nyla whispered. I feel it too. I've been trying not to, but I do. I love you, Dominic. I love you and Lyric both so much. They stood there on the balcony, holding each other as the city lights sparkled below and music drifted from the ballroom. And for the first time in 3 years, Dominic felt complete. The next morning, everything shifted in the Wright household. The pretense was gone. Dominic no longer hid his feelings, and neither did Nyla. He held her hand at breakfast. He kissed her goodnight. They were, quite simply, a couple. Lyric noticed immediately, of course. Children always do. One evening, she climbed into Nyla's lap while they sat together in the library. Nyla? Yes, sweetheart. Are you going to be my new mommy? The question hung in the air, heavy with hope and fear. Nyla's heart clenched. She looked over at Dominic, who watched them both with gentle eyes. Would you like that? Nyla asked carefully. Lyric nodded vigorously. Yes. You make Daddy smile. You make me happy, and you don't leave like everyone else. So I think you should stay forever and be my mommy. Nyla's eyes filled with tears as she hugged the little girl close. I love you so much, Lyric. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. But not everyone was happy about this new development. The tabloids got wind of the story within days. Photographers camped outside the estate gates. Headlines screamed sensational half-truths. Billionaire widower falls for teen babysitter. They got her age wrong, but facts didn't matter to gossip rags. Dominic writes scandalous romance. From employee to girlfriend, inappropriate or true love. Victoria Monroe gave interviews, spreading thinly veiled criticisms disguised as concern. Business partners called Dominic, questioning his judgment. His lawyers warned him about potential legal complications. The pressure was immense. One night, 3 weeks after the gala, Nyla sat in the library, scrolling through vicious comments on social media. Gold digger. She trapped him. Inappropriate age gap. Poor child being raised by that woman. The words cut deep, each one a knife to her confidence. Dominic found her there, tears streaming down her face, her phone clutched in her trembling hand. "Nyla," he said softly, taking the phone gently from her grasp. "Don't read that garbage. Those people don't know you. They don't know us." "Maybe they're right," Nyla whispered brokenly. "Maybe I am just a girl who got lucky. Maybe you'll wake up one day and realize you made a mistake. Maybe—" "Stop," Dominic said firmly, kneeling in front of her and taking her face in his hands. "Listen to me. You are not a gold digger. You are not inappropriate. You are not a mistake. You are the woman I love. The woman who saved my daughter and gave me a reason to live again. I don't care what anyone else thinks. The only opinions that matter are ours and Lyric's. But your business will survive. My partners will adjust or find other opportunities. I've built an empire, Nyla. I can rebuild again if I have to. But I cannot rebuild what we have if I let fear and outside pressure destroy it." He stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her. "We're going to face this together. You, me, and Lyric. Let them talk. Let them judge. We know the truth." The next day, Dominic called a press conference. Nyla begged him not to, terrified of the additional scrutiny, but he insisted. "Hiding makes us look ashamed," he said. "And I'm not ashamed. I'm proud of what we have." So they stood together in front of dozens of cameras and reporters, Dominic in a sharp suit and Nyla in a simple dress, their hands clasped. "Yes, I'm in a relationship with Nyla James," Dominic said firmly, his voice clear and unwavering. "She's 20 years old, intelligent, compassionate, hardworking, and the best thing that's happened to my family in years. She loves my daughter as her own. She's brought joy back into our home. And if you have a problem with that, I suggest you examine your own prejudices and assumptions. Age difference? We're both adults. Employer-employee dynamic? She's no longer my employee. She's my partner in every sense. Any other concerns are rooted in judgment and prejudice, not legitimate criticism. This press conference is over." He walked off the stage with Nyla's hand still firmly in his, leaving reporters shouting questions behind them. The response was mixed. Some people praised Dominic for standing by his relationship. Others continued to criticize. But slowly, as weeks passed and people saw that this wasn't some fleeting scandal, but a genuine relationship built on love and mutual respect, the noise began to quiet. 6 months after that press conference, the Wright family had found their rhythm. Lyric thrived in school, her teachers commenting on the dramatic positive change in her behavior and happiness. Dominic worked less, prioritized family more, and discovered that life was richer when you actually lived it instead of just surviving it. And Nyla enrolled in online college courses, working toward her degree, while also exploring what she truly wanted to do with her life. She discovered a passion for child psychology and began volunteering at children's hospitals, working with kids who'd experienced trauma and loss. One evening in late spring, Dominic took Nyla to the garden where white roses bloomed, Simone's favorite flowers, which he'd kept alive all these years. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. "I want to show you something," Dominic said, leading her to a marble bench beneath an arbor of climbing roses. They sat together, and Dominic pulled out a small velvet box. Nyla's breath caught. "Dominic!" He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. Elegant, simple, perfect. "Nyla James, you walked into my life when everything was broken. You healed my daughter with patience and love. You healed me by simply being yourself. Genuine, kind, unshakable in your commitment. You've given me a second chance at happiness, at family, at love. I don't want to spend another day without knowing you'll be by my side forever. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Nyla's face as she nodded, unable to speak through the emotion choking her throat. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes." Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like tears and joy and promises. From the mansion window, Lyric watched with Bernard beside her, both of them smiling. "She's going to be my mommy for real now, isn't she?" Lyric asked. Bernard squeezed her shoulder gently. "Yes, Miss Lyric." "She is." "Good," Lyric said, her face breaking into a huge smile. "I knew she wouldn't leave us." She promised. And indeed, Nyla kept that promise. They were married 6 months later in an intimate ceremony in that same garden, surrounded by white roses and the people who truly mattered. Nyla's family, Dominic's closest friends, Bernard, and of course Lyric, who served as flower girl and cried happy tears when Nyla officially became her mother. The mansion that had been cold and silent for years now rang with laughter and music and life. Breakfast was a family affair, filled with conversation and plans for the day. Evenings were spent in the library, reading together, or in the gardens, playing and exploring. Sundays meant pancakes and family movie marathons. They were, quite simply, happy. And sometimes late at night, Dominic would lie awake and marvel at how life could surprise you, how love could find you in the most unexpected places, how a young woman with nothing but determination and compassion could walk through his door and change absolutely everything. I want you to understand something important. This story isn't just about a billionaire falling in love with his daughter's babysitter. It's about what happens when we let go of pride, of fear, of the walls we build around our broken hearts. It's about choosing to be vulnerable again after loss. Dominic could have chosen someone from his world, someone polished and appropriate, someone who fit perfectly into society's expectations. But he chose the woman who showed up every single day, who stayed when things got hard, who loved his daughter without conditions or expectations. And Nyla could have walked away, could have listened to the doubts, the criticisms, the voice inside her head that said she didn't belong in that world. But she chose courage. She chose love. Love isn't about money or status or fitting into predetermined boxes. It's about who holds your hand during the storms, who stays when everyone else walks away, who sees you, really sees you, and loves you anyway. Dominic, Nyla, and Lyric became a real family, not because of wealth or perfection, but because of patience, compassion, and the willingness to heal together. They proved that sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that don't make sense on paper, the ones that defy expectations, the ones built on genuine connection rather than societal approval. If this story touched your heart, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. Tap the like icon. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. And tell me in the comments, Have you ever loved someone the world said you shouldn't? Have you ever had to choose between what society expected and what your heart wanted? I read every single comment, and your stories matter to me. Thank you for being here, for listening, for allowing me to share this story with you. Remember, the greatest love stories aren't found in fairy tales or romance novels. They're built by ordinary people who refuse to give up on each other, who choose love over fear, who create their own definitions of family and happiness. Until next time, keep believing in love, keep showing up for the people who matter, and keep writing your own story, regardless of what anyone else thinks it should look like.